Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I'm here to introduce someone who needs no introduction and also someone else who needs no introduction. I'm delighted to be joined by Robert Powell, who has read all of Alan Garner's books onto audio, I think, over the years.
Yeah, I think so. Down the years.
Down
yes.
the years. And the format of the evening, Robert and I are going to have a chat, take quite a deep dive into what we know together and separately about the process of Alan Garner. And there'll be an opportunity for some questions at the end. The one request I would have, please, is can we have no informal recording over audio? You know, if you want some photos, take them at the end. And that's simply because we are having the proceedings formally recorded and we want what's available out there in the online interweb to be of this quality. And isn't it nice not to have to watch us through a brick? So we'd really appreciate that. So as a starting point, we are going to be taking the wonderful Powells and Thrums, which is the work of a lifetime. It's a distillation of Alan Garner's collected essays, poetries and stories. And as with all Alan Garner books, every word means something. It's not the most easy of titles to ascertain. So I'm just going to hand over to Robert to introduce us to the world and the meaning of Powells and Thrums.
This is the introduction. Joseph Garner was my grandfather. His great-grandfather, Joseph, was a little master, as was that Joseph's son, William. They worked in a room at the end of the house, a room that even in my childhood was still called Uncle's. They were self-employed hand-loom weavers and sold their woven lengths to big masters at Macclesfield and Stockport markets every week, walking both ways and carrying back the next batch of raw thread to the loom. Handloom weaving produced snippets of cloth, which the weaver kept for his own use. These oddments were known as Powells and Thrums, and Joseph's and William's families would have been clad with the bits that skill had brought together to make something whole and new. As with weaving, so with writing. A lifetime of working with a pen produces pieces of thought, the Powells and Thrums of research and experience and imagination and story that stand alone, but, because they are the product of the same loom, carry a common thread that can be shaped into something more than its parts. And that is what is offered here.
I suppose we ought to also offer some insight into why you're getting myself and Robert here together. And there are many reasons, but I can explain best in my father's words from the introduction to The Golden Mean, which is one of the short stories in Powells and Thrums. I wrote this for Robert Powell to read on the radio. Robert is the best reader of my work. We were both 10 years apart, fundamentally influenced by Bert Parnaby at Manchester Grammar School. When Robert was asked why he recorded so much of what I write, he replied, "I know where Alan's coming from." And he does. Over to you, Robert. Where's Alan Garner coming from?
It is extraordinary how we were educated at Manchester Grammar School and by strange coincidence educated. There's lots of branches at MGS. There's a classic side, the science side, and the modern side. And we both went up the classic side. So we both read Latin and Greek and ancient history, which meant that 10 years apart, we had the same masters. All the masters that Alan mentions in the book, I had the same one. So we were taught virtually identically 10 years apart. And then when we met, which is 50 odd years ago, there was an extraordinary recognition of like minds. Two people, which is not very flattering today, but completely doused in logic, which is not very popular, as I say. But it's unavoidable. Once you're infected by it, it's very difficult to get away from it. But this is meant that when Alan was talking to me and I was talking to him, we a lot of it went completely unsaid, and we had an immediate, and it was quite extraordinary, an immediate understanding of each other, even though we had taken completely different paths down the route. And it is my delight that a lot of the time as an actor you're dealing with the banality, and the job of an actor is to take this banality and turn it from dross into gold. So when every now and again you are given good words to say or read, then it is wonderful. It is just a very much easier job than it was before. And that is the joy. And I found this always with Alan's writing, and this is why my heart leapt, sometimes with a certain amount of trepidation, because Powell and Thrums, which I just recorded about 2 months ago, is one of the hardest books I've ever had to read, because it's about Alan. And the responsibility of trying to find one of my oldest friends' voice, not as an impersonation, but to find and do him justice as to because he is a very, very, very complex man, and it is a wonderful read. I really do recommend it, but it was very difficult to read it without feeling, am I doing justice to this extraordinary writer? Anyway, I probably did.
You would know if you hadn't, Robert.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
always the way. Here goes.
I have recorded. And I think one of the things about Alan is, I think there was one book, Boneland,
Yes.
where I think Alan got really beady because I won an award for the reading of his book, and he didn't. So yeah.
One of the things that I love about Powell and Thrums is the way that Alan Garner kind of explores language from all these different levels. But there was a bit in, let me just get the right essay. Yeah, the wonderful essay, A Bull on the Tongue, where he's unpacking what language can do and how it works in different contexts. And there are a couple of quotes that I want to pull out from that. But the first one is, so language is metaphor and poetry, not the packing of a dictionary. Then is it even more? Yes, it is play. And I think this is something that's really clear in both Powell and Thrums and Treacle Walker, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The playfulness of the language and the range of the language. But I can absolutely see that was part of the challenge. And I just wondered how you prepared for that. I know you and my father have conversations around it. I just wonder how you prepare for that.
Well, I have to treat it mostly as I virtually treat everything. As an actor, I'm not a great one for knowing what's coming next. I have always felt, much to the irritation of a lot of directors who, when we are coming to the end of a television show or whatever, and they were run through for the producers, so before we actually go into the studio and put it onto camera. And I get chided because that was fine, Robert, but you need to, and I said, you're going to have to trust me on this, that when the red light goes on, then I will find the performance. But there's no point in, I want to leave something to chance. And this is the way I've always worked. And I feel this about working with Alan's work, is that I have to find his voice, but I now trust myself over the last 50 years or so that I know what it is. And therefore, I don't do a huge amount of preparation, purely and simply, so that I can get surprised while I'm reading it, in the same way that you will get surprised when you're reading. And I hope that registers in some way in the delivery of my interpretation of it. But he never lets me down, always. I mean, it's just a joy to be treated with words. And this is the thing, you're absolutely right. With Alan, it is all about words, and particularly about, to set the record straight, Alan is from Cheshire and I'm from Lancashire, which is just up the road, really. And my Lancastrian voice is not that different from Alan's Cheshire voice. But the difference being that I was brought up in an industrial city, Salford, a mile from Trafford Park, which is where most people died from lung cancer or tuberculosis. And Alan was brought up in an extraordinary environment in the country, if you like, of Cheshire. But the words are sometimes identical, and the way they are delivered. And it's not difficult for me to hear that voice.
I think one of the really remarkable things in Powell and Thrums is the range of the language and the investigation of words. You know, this linking of Cheshire dialect to quotations from Beowulf. But don't.
I just want to say this. Alan's trick, not a trick because he's written it, but I come up and I'm there in a studio, or I'm not in the studio because I've done a bit of preparation. I'm confronted with Welsh to read. I'm confronted with Middle English to read. And what else? Yes, he chucks everything at me, and I have to find a way, because I don't understand Middle English at all. But what was Alan saying about in Cheshire? And I forget about what it is in terms of an accent and dialect.
I'm going to veer away from this one, Robert, because I don't want to try and summarise. But there's amazing moments where he's connecting. I said I don't want to summarise. Look at me, I'm summarising. The connections he makes between landscape, language, and myth is quite astounding. Rooted in, and it's an investigation of specific roots of words. And I think you're absolutely right. The bits of Welsh in there and the bits of Old English, but also there is a lovely thread that runs through the collection, which is the voice of his grandfather.
Yeah. And
there are wonderful quotes that sort of link and echo. And I think what is so powerful about this book is it's about craft. It's about a lineage of craft. And I'm thinking back to what you're saying about when you first met my father and that connection. And I've been lucky enough to be on the periphery of conversations over the years, that it wasn't an old boys club. It was a what you're doing in the present. And I think there was a lovely moment where again, where is it? Here we are. It says, above everything, however, whether observational or visionary, creativity is risk. Without risk, there can be no progress. I think that's some of the best advice I've read about writing or living a creative life. And that seems to be something that you have explored.
Totally. It's this is as I say, this is about a relationship where we both recognise exactly the same things. You would think that the conversations would be quite dull because we're just agreeing with each other, but they are enhancing. In fact, to know that there's somebody else in the world who thinks like you do, when a lot of people sit and go, "What?" It's nice. It's nice to be able to share something. But yes, risk. And Alan's writing is always on that borderline of risk, you know, and you either buy into it as a reader, I'm sure you will, that's why you're here. But there will be people who won't buy into it, who don't get it. Alan's writing manages to actually engage adults as well as children, because he writes not down to children, but he brings them up to him. And it is an extraordinary gift. And it's why, down the years, the people who know and have read all these books and have let their children read them, I've just given my grandson, who's 9, I've just given him a copy of Elidor. Well, in fact, I've given him a copy of my reading of it, sorry. I've also given him a hard copy, so he can read along. Anyway.
But I think what's so wonderful about that, Rob, again, like Elidor, I think I always struggle with this. I was saying Alan Garner, my father, obviously the same person, but but sometimes to talk about his work and his process, I can't say my father because that's a different bloke. Alan Garner on the page. What I always love about Elidor is that it follows that pattern of being an Alan Garner relationship with landscape, but the landscape, the modern landscape, is a landscape of destruction and rebuild. It's similar in terms of having a sense of correspondence of what is above and what is below to the Weirdstone and the Moon of Gomrath, but it's taking it into a completely different landscape, much more of an urban landscape, and much more of a possibly a shared landscape that you remember as well, the slum clearance. And,
oh yeah.
But also before, Robert, what you were saying about him being a children's author, I think it's something that he's written about a lot, saying that he never wrote for children. And this progression from the Weirdstone, the Moon of Gomrath, through Elidor, through the Owl Service, through Redshift, and then coming to Strandloper, I don't think anyone could have read that and thought that was for children. And I think there was a sort of slight. Some people could see it as not being a progression. I could. The interesting thing for me is that I'm the youngest of 5 siblings. And I say this, I speak without any authority within that. I am just, this is just my memory and my perception. But I grew up with my father, Alan Garner, writing Strandloper, and that experience of talking about stories in that kind of way. And it was hugely formative. I also know that we have the publishers of Strandloper here in the audience, and it was a shift for people that weren't expecting it. But I think anyone that knew the canon of his work could have seen the progression as well.
But I think in Alan's writing, he first wrote when he was 21. He was a young man, and I think that he says it in his own words much better than I can. But he said, if you're 21 and you start to write about things, adult themes, you haven't lived them. You haven't actually been through them. So you actually don't, you can invent it, which a lot of people do, but you actually haven't lived through it. And you can see the progression with Alan, really, of he was not writing for children, he was writing about them because that was the world that he had just been through.
Yes.
And therefore he knew and understood completely, even though it was an extraordinary childhood. And then once you get up to Strandloper, this is a grown-up. This is a grown-up talking for grown-ups. And if children want to join in, that's fine, and most of them do. But that is the progression I see. That through his books, I see the development of somebody from adolescence to young man to old bugger.
Yes,
you know
indeed,
I mean?
indeed.
But the old bugger is the one that I think is really terrific. Because I think for him to have survived all these years, I know you wouldn't mind me calling him that. is used to it. But it's is quite extraordinary.
Yeah. I mean, the old bugger was always there. It just took a while to emerge, I think.
I know. Yes, even 50 years ago, he was.
Yeah. But you saying that, Robert, just reminds me of another wonderful point that's made in the book that keeps on popping up as a theme within the essays, is this idea of that a book comes when you're ready for it, when it's ready to be told. And in the wonderful essay, the Valley of the Demon, it's talking about Thursbitch, and when he first had the research kernel for Thursbitch, which was in 1977. By the middle of 1977, I could not face Thursbitch. What I was finding through research was more interlinked and unsafe than anything I could structure as a novelist. I was not up to the job. Not until 1996, with the experience of having written Strandloper as support, did I feel less inadequate. I opened the files again for one last try and set off for the valley again with Griselda. And that's the start of a wonderful moment of exploration. I've been reading a lot of this. Robert, could you share some specific readings that Alan selected for us for tonight?
Let's see if I can find them. Oh, yeah. Well, here we go. Well, I tell you, I want to start off with R.I.P.
Yes.
I first came across this poem when Griselda published years ago a sort of a compendium of poetry, and in it was this poem, which is R.I.P. A girl in our village makes love in the churchyard. She doesn't care who, but it must be the churchyard. They say she prefers the old part to the new. Green granite chippings may be rankle, worn slabs welcome. And after, in her bedroom, she sees the mirror's view of her shoulder embossed in loving memory. Anne, why do you do it? You've 9 A-levels. Why not, Anne? If bones remember, you'll bring them joy. It's as good a place as any. Close by, nave, rood screen, and chapel of ease, peal of the bells, bob singles and grandsire doubles, and when you half close your eyes, the horned gargoyles choose. But it has to happen. Anne, tonight you were levelled. William Jones, late of this parish, was cold beneath you, his great-great-grandson warm above. And you rose, though your shoulder didn't show it, in glorious expectation of the life to come.
Not just an old bugger, a mischievous old bugger.
Oh, I know. Very mischievous. Did you want any more at the moment, or shall we?
I think, shall we move on to the other selection? Because I
Loneliness of a Long Distance?
Yeah, because I think this really shows the range in the collection. Over to you, Robert.
Yeah, what is nice about this is I asked Alan, when Elizabeth asked me if I would do a couple of readings, and I asked Alan what he would like. And so this is nice. I have put in, later, which we'll find, I put in the one that I chose. But I quite like the fact that I know that Alan is, and I love this. It's the friendliness of the long distance runner. In the early 1950s, I was a serious athlete. They were the days before joggers clogged the highway, so it was unusual for me to see another runner when I was training. We fell into the habit of meeting up and pounding the miles together for company. All I knew about him was that he was a mathematician at Manchester University. He was a stocky, barrel-chested, with a high-pitched, Donnish voice and the aerodynamics of a brick. He was funny and witty, and he talked endlessly, but I often understood very little of what he was saying. And it became clear that he ran partly in order to think. He seemed to be obsessed by the mathematics of biology, particularly the patterns on butterflies' wings, and the distribution of a leopard's spots. It was exciting to be with him. We had much in common: a love of paradox, a sense of the ridiculous, a taste for punning. Do you know Debussy's On Cooking the First Hero in Spring? Oh. And we had both been traumatized by Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, especially by the transformation of the Wicked Queen into the witch. We used to go over the scene in detail, dwelling on the ambiguity of the apple in folklore, red on one side, green on the other, one side of which gave death. Beyond that, I remember a single instance of conversation about his work. He asked me whether, in my opinion as a classical linguist, artificial intelligence was possible. Could a machine be made to think? After a couple of miles of silence, I said that, in my opinion, it could not. And that was that. He said no more. In October 1952, the police ordered me not to associate with him, but would give no reason for this. He killed himself on the 7th of June 1954. An ignorant and vulgar judge had given him the choice of a prison sentence or chemical castration when he pleaded guilty to gross indecency. And I was overwhelmed by fury at the prurient, gloating humiliation imposed on my friend, and by a sense of guilt that I could not help him, which lasted for decades and was made only worse when a relaxation of the Official Secrets Act revealed his genius and work. He was said to have shortened World War II by several years and saved uncountable lives. He died of cyanide poisoning. By his body was an apple, partly eaten. On the 24th of December, 2013, under the royal prerogative of mercy, Alan Turing was pardoned. Until I read this, 50 years I know now, I never knew that story. Isn't it amazing? This is what I mean. We just don't. There are certain things that are us, and certain things that may be yours, and maybe we can share them. But every now and again, Alan will only share through his writing. This is the privilege of being able to read this book.
Yeah, I found that incredibly moving to read because it was something that I knew. I think partly because my brother Joe was very good with computers early on, and I think it was a conversation that maybe had come up around that. But one of the things I would say about my father is that he's not a name dropper. It's not he wouldn't have presented it in that way. And what I find that very moving and quite emotional to hear, because he takes you through it like a folk tale. Because actually, this is what folk tales are. They are landscape and motifs, and the way that he threads that into this personal reveal is so powerful.
And the writer in him doesn't mention the name until right at the end.
So it doesn't become the tale of two Allens. It's something very different. I think the final element that I think we probably should explain a little bit about this wonderful cover is the significance of this landscape in the context of Alan Garner's work, in that the house there is the house that he moved to and then moved, parallel quantum houses, and has lived and worked in since 1957. So, and it's something that's talked about from different angles and at different times in the book. And the dish there is the radio telescope at Jodrell Bank. And this was your piece that you wanted to read, Robert, wasn't it? Where he connects those two locations and that sense of deep time.
Oh, yeah. The
far.
Oh, yeah. This passage, when I read this for the first time, obviously I read it at home when I was prepping the book for recording. But it was only when I spoke it out loud, that, well, you hear. Far, far from here, over 7 mucky middens, beyond thrice 9 lands, beyond a 10th kingdom, on the island of Buyan, there is a crystal mountain, 16 miles high, 16 miles wide, and 16 miles long. Every 1,000 years, a little bird comes and wipes its beak once on the crystal mountain and flies away. And when the little bird has worn the crystal mountain to the sea, then will have passed the first second of eternity. It will stay with me forever.
And it's something that I found incredibly moving, and also I had to keep on returning to these echoes within the collection of essays. The way that this patch of land has yielded flint and artifacts, and this is where I grew up, right? I know where that is. If you ask me very nicely afterwards, I'll tell you. It's
There's a clue.
Yes. That thing moves though.
Well, not sideways.
Round and round.
Oh no, it goes round.
That I grew up with that landscape, and with the library of my father's and my mother's books, not just the books that my father wrote, but his research library. And my mother reviewed a lot of books and was a librarian. So I had this wealth of books where everything was discussed. You know, we were allowed to read whatever we wanted from those shelves, but it was discussed. And then we had the garden, where everything that came up out of the garden was examined and discussed. Didn't do me any harm whatsoever. And the way that this landscape, the tools, the words, the things that are rooted in that patch of land come up through the essays and echo each other is quite incredible. There's Old English and there's the old time and English of that patch.
But that was another thing. In fact, I don't know where it is in the book, but I remember it vividly. Is that this ground here is possibly, I don't know, they're not generations, they're ages. I think there are 3 ages of civilization in this one place, layered down over 5,000, possibly even more than that, years. They're all here, which Alan found by serendipity, by, as you will read in the book, his finding of this house, which originally didn't have this bit. This is the medicine house, which you learn about in the book. But the original house with the chimneys, he found by accident. And of all people, for Alan, whether finding it created the Alan that we know, or whether the Alan was always there and he was always going to find this, I don't know.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
The entire area and the ground is just steeped in several different civilizations. And Alan is an archaeologist now as well. And when I went up there, he showed me, and we were sifting to see if we could find any more bits while we were up there. But he showed me this extraordinary axe head that figures in quite a lot of them, certainly in at least one of them. It also figures in Powell's and Thrums, and it is utterly absorbing. I promise you.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. The one thing you can say about these books about them, there's another one coming. Am I allowed to say that? No.
Well, you've said it now, Robert. It's a reissue of a companion selection of essays, The Voice That Thunders, which was originally published by Harville after Strandloper thanks Harville people in the audience, and is now being reissued. So that's coming quite. And you've just had the experience of reading. So you read that one, and then you Voice That Thunders.
Yeah,
you're still standing.
No, I've got. I think Strandloper in the spring or early next year. I think that's what the plot is. And my agent tells me. Alan hasn't said a word.
I think before we open up to questions, I'd just like to do a last bit of connection between this patch of land and creativity. And I get very nervous when I am paraphrasing. I was trying to find the exact reference, but I am pretty sure it's 10,000 years of occupation they can trace to there. And
I thought I'd under-exaggerated.
Yes, it's always best to. We'd be in terrible trouble if we over-exaggerated anything in here. So the other remarkable thing about that place is that after writing books based on Audley Edge within the patch of land of Cheshire, during lockdown, Alan Garner's work became full circle, and it came back to the house itself, the old medicine house, which is the Blackton Trust, and it's the gable there. And I can't even begin to explain to you how and what that house is. It's all in the book.
Yeah.
But it became the setting for Treacle Walker, my father's most recent novel that was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2022. And there is a wonderful passage within it that I think encapsulates this sense of the time shifts and just how powerful that place is. I shouldn't try and summarise it. I'm not going to. Robert, over to you.
I have to say that I've also recorded this too. This is a quite extraordinary book. And I think Alan wouldn't mind me saying that he is the only person that could have written it. It is just, it's the Alan I know. It's his essence. It's a wonderful piece. This is only just a small bit. Outside, the iron ring handle of the door banged on the wood 3 slow times, sounding through the house. Joe went to the small window by the door and looked. He saw no one, only the pony under the tree and the bleach of heat. "There's nobody there," he said. "Then there's nobody wishes to come in," said the man. Bang, bang, bang. Joe felt the door shake. "What must I do?" Bang, bang, bang. Joe looked again. The pony, the tree, the heat. He lifted the latch. A wind threw the door onto him, shoving him against the stack, and night spilled in. Snow stung his face. He forced the door against the wind and the latch clanged shut. He clung to the chimney post, but night was in the room, a sheet of darkness flapping from wall to wall. It changed shape, swirling, flowing. It dropped to the ground and ruckled over the floor bricks, then up to the joists and beams of the ceiling. Hung, fell, humped. It shrieked, reared against the chimney opening, but did not enter. It surged through the house by cracks and gaps in the timbers, out under the eaves. There was a whispering silence, and on the floor, snow melted to tears. "My name," said the man, "is Treacle Walker."
Before we open out to questions, I'm sure you've got lots of questions. Usually, when I have the pleasure of interviewing other authors, I end with, what advice would you give to fellow creative people, anyone who wants to live a creative life? And like I said, one of the real privileges I feel reading this is that Alan Garner and my father, like the whole same person, places craft and creativity within a lineage of the Garner family name. And that's, it's, if you want to know about that family, go and read the Stone Book Quartet, because that's brilliant too. But I was just going to ask Robert to share just one final tiny bit of reading, which is my father quoting his grandfather, Joseph Garner, whom this book is dedicated to. And this advice, which was passed down to my father from his grandfather, is advice that I cannot remember not knowing. I was not going to get emotional. I'm doing really well, aren't I?
You are.
Yes, thank you very much. But this is advice that I have quoted to others, especially the second line of advice. And it's, oh, come on, I can do it. It's advice that I feel in my bones that I try to live by. So I couldn't read it. Robert, could you read those final couple of lines?
Of course. Chief is, in fact, the High Master of Manchester Grammar School. I wish the Chief could have met Grandad. They would have understood each other. Grandad had brought me up to observe two requirements of a fulfilled life. The first was, "Allus take as long as the job tells thee, because it'll be there when there's not, and we don't want folk saying, 'What fool made that codge?'" The second was, "If the other fella can do it, let him." That is, seek out within you that which is uniquely yours and pursue it, regardless of cost. Eric James would have agreed.
Thank you so much, Robert. I couldn't have done that bit. Thank you. So I think we have 5-10 minutes so for questions. On the dot of 7, we will hear the disembodied voice of Blackwells kicking everyone else out. It's not my father. It is it is automated Blackwells. Please don't leave. You're very welcome to stay and buy some books.
Don't take any notes.
Yeah, just a great. So any questions, anyone? Don't be shy. Yes.
I'm really interested in whether you feel Alan Garner has an association between mathematics and storytelling and mathematics and writing. I'm very conscious through his work that there's this huge science element, there's a lot of physics that comes through, and you can see it in Treacle even when it's not there in those whirligigs and everything, there's that essence. And it was the whirligigs that made me wonder actually whether that sense of the spiral, whether the mathematics, that golden section that I see when I push through illustration all the time, is actually there for him in writing as well, or is that? Do you think that's a nonsense?
He wrote a short story about it. It's in here. No, I'm not being familiar. It's called The Golden Mean.
It's called The Golden Mean.
Yeah.
It's the one I recorded for the BBC.
Yes.
He was surprised. He did pi to pages of it. And this is what I got, and I did all the pages of these numbers for the BBC. And when I rang Alan and told him, he said, "You never." I didn't expect you to do that. It was just there as a ... would have done. Anyway.
No, he would have expected you to.
And I knew, when I was doing it, I thought, this'll learn him.
But also, don't leave with a half codge. I think there's also that element. I always feel, I feel very aware when I'm talking about my father, his work, Alan Garner. I have no right to talk for him, and I can only talk about him around and find parallels with my creative life. But I know he'd have done that. I know he would have noticed if you hadn't. And I can absolutely imagine reading that thinking, this is actually a spell and I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to risk the dimensions breaking. But also in Powell and Thrums, he does talk quite a lot about, he writes quite a lot about full split between science and creativity and overlap. So there's loads of stuff in there. Anyone else?
Gosh.
Yes.
Robert, can I ask, what is your favourite of the books that you've read?
Well, I suppose I find it hard to beat Treacle Walker. I mean, I suppose it's because it's the most recent of his books. I've also recorded his memoirs, which I, again, had great pleasure doing. I think they're all brilliant. Treacle Walker was of the fiction is I think the most extraordinary.
For me, it's a tie between Treacle Walker and the Stone Book Quartet.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like my experience of reading Treacle Walker was very powerful. I don't mind talking about this. This is something I have spoken to both my parents about, because it was written during lockdown. It had been distilling, and this is something that again is in the book. That time that it takes for a novel or a story to come. You know, Treacle Walker was an idea and had been forming long before lockdown. But I read it just as we were coming out of lockdown, and I found it incredibly moving. Oh, I'm doing it again, come on. That I felt like I was back home reading that. And the thing with the Stone Book, again, it's that sort of lineage, that Garner lineage, which is so powerful. And what I love about Treacle Walker is, no spoilers, but there's all sorts of lineage and time echoes and place echoes going on there. And Robert, I scribbled down what you were saying before, that you didn't think that my father would be annoyed with you saying that he's the only person who could have written Treacle Walker. I think he'd be really annoyed if you said anyone else could have written it. That would have annoyed him. But you're absolutely right. Could only have come from Alan Garner.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I've done God knows how many dozens of audiobooks, but Alan is unique, and it's he has a unique touch. And when you pick up a book and start to read it, if you didn't know who'd written it, you'd know very quickly or understand very quickly that it's going to be Alan Garner, because he dares to take you down paths that you didn't think you would dare to go.
And I think also what's so brilliant and absorbing about Powell's and Thrums is, through this tapestry of the creative life, through these pieces on writing, on creativity, on research, on landscape, written at different times, you can see the echoes coming together now, and also having been edited and put together in the order that they're in the book, that everything has a reason. It's not a how to write a novel book, it's how to live a creative life. And I think what I found incredibly moving about it is the combination between the absolute precision, that precise use of language, the playfulness, and the space, as with all Alan Garner's writing, for you, the reader, to have your own connections and to put these ideas together in your own way. It's not a dictate, but my goodness, it's tools for living in there. Oh, we could go on forever, but I think we probably ought to let people buy some books. But I just want to end by saying a few words of thanks. Firstly, just such a pleasure to be here and to be paying tribute to my father and his work and that Garner lineage, and to be doing it with you, Robert. You know, we've been around each other a long time, and there's no one else that I could have done this with. So thank you. And I do want to make a point that I sort of touched on earlier, is that I'm one of 5 of Alan Garner's children. You know, I'm just one from sitting here beside a Powell, and and these observations and reflections are mine. I'm not an authority. I don't have the right to speak for anyone else. But another thrum to mention, oh, I'm doing it again, come on, is my mother, Griselda. She's been a life and research companion to my father. She's mentioned a lot in the book. Whenever we went back into the valley, it's probably Griselda and Alan. Also, what's lovely is that she actually took this photograph for the cover, and this became such a testament to this place and their life together. And this event was deeply encouraged by her. It was both her and my father who wanted this to happen. So if not for the Griselda, things would be quite different, I think. So I also want to say thanks to the Blackwells team, to James Orton, to the Fourth Estate team, Patrick Hargaden, who really made this happen, Al Kenny for doing the filming for us, and all of you for coming. So thank you.